children. Again. 1, 2, 3.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the internet. I am your host, Escalante TV, and it has been quite a while since I've sat down and talked in front of the microphone once again. I've taken about a couple weeks ever since school ended and sort of tried to unwind a little bit, reflect a little bit, and try to rebrand my channel again. If you've seen sort of my channel art change, that's because I've been kind of working on that. And I've been trying to get back into the groove of making YouTube videos after a semester of kind of just sparsely uploading and, having the time to do that. But, since my school semester's over, I'm kind of free for the summer, trying to get back into the groove of making videos. I kind of wanted to sort of sit down and talk about a cartoon that I just saw. Now, this cartoon, I think I discovered it a little bit back earlier this month as I was browsing YouTube, and the algorithm took me to this one cartoon that looked very different. It had like basically this art style that reminded me of Tintin. Have you guys ever seen The Adventures of Tintin? That's what like this cartoon's art style is, and it's called The Long Long Holiday. Just at first glance, you look and see like, this looks like a very kid-friendly show, right? Like it has kids, it looks pretty fun. And just by the intro itself, it has kids playing and stuff like that. But I think you're going to have to really see this show to actually understand what it's all about.
Did you know that these guys are Nazis?
Yeah, so it covers World War II. And I was surprised to see like German uniforms there, and I was like, damn, like are they actually going to like show swastikas and Nazi salutes? And they are. And this show doesn't shy away from showing things from the Second World War, like actual like Nazis and French resistance, gunfights, and everything that was going on during that time. And it was a pretty dark time in human history. And this is a French animated show, and it really taps into the history of France during World War II as, pretty much French history and sort of that history during World War II isn't covered as much in the history books, well, at least in the American history books, since France did surrender. France basically signed an armistice in June of 1940, and pretty much they surrendered to the Germans, and pretty much the Nazis occupied the north of France, and to the south of France there was a puppet fascist government led by Marshal Pétain. He was a old World War I general who basically decided to pretty much, take power and be the leader of this sort of impromptu dictator, I guess. I don't know what you would call Pétain. And basically, he was like a wannabe fascist, and basically, he's seen as a traitor. He's basically seen as a traitor, Nazi collaborator, and who betrayed the French nation. And you kind of see that through the kids' eyes and in the adults. But let's talk about, what this show is all about. So the kids, right? So this is told from the children's perspective. So our main characters that we're introduced to is Ernest and Colette, and they basically come from France. And pretty much like their parents take this trip to the countryside, and it in the Dieppe region, in this fictional town called Grangeville. And basically, as Germany is invading Poland, France and Britain declare war on Germany. And the children's father is called up to the war to go fight. And the mother falls ill with tuberculosis, so she goes to a hospital in Switzerland. So the father is off fighting the war in the Maginot Line, and the children are pretty much left alone with their grandparents, and they kind of go through this whole new lifestyle change because they're without their parents. They're city kids in the countryside, and Ernest, you kind of see that perspective from Ernest trying to get used to that sort of country, to the countryside, because it's a whole different culture. You see the kind of the differences in culture, and then there's these kids that bully him, the Morteau kids, who basically like bully him and say, like you're a Parisian, you're such a pansy. Look at you in the chicken coop, all scared, and he kind of pushes him around, and they also kind of bully this other kid that comes from the Alsace region that has kind of like a German and French mix to it. And there's this kid named Fernand who has like this deep accent, and they kind of make it apparent too that he has like a German undertone to his French.
My name is Fernand. I come from Aubernay, a little village in Alsace.
Until you spoke, I did not know we were French.
By the time June 1940 hits, they pretty much try to evacuate the town. The little girl Colette befriends like a baby pig, and she carries him around, and then she kind of runs out in the middle of the road, and then a BF 109 just comes in and strafe runs, almost killing them. So it kind of really does go into the sort of near-death aspects of World War II. I mean, in war, civilians and soldiers kind of suffer in these areas, and it kind of does get dark when they find dead bodies. When the kids kind of find dead bodies around, and the adults try to kind of protect them, and there's this sort of bound duty that the older brother gets to protect his little sister while there's a war going on, because there was an earlier sort of conflict between them where Ernest kind of just runs away for a little bit. He learns to be brave after spending the night at this makeshift clubhouse, and because the Morteaus are just bullying to death. But he soon becomes strong. He develops into a kind of a strong older brother as a guardian to protect his little sister. So that's nice to see that there is character development as these kids experience the war as it's going on. Eventually, spoiler alert, France surrenders, and they return back to their little town, and basically try to cope with the whole idea that the French nation doesn't exist anymore, and that the Germans are here to stay. So the kids basically form a resistance group. They form like a small resistance group, and they call themselves the Robinsons, because I think it pretty much comes from Ernest's interest in reading Robinson Crusoe. And pretty much they have to deal with like these Germans who are bullying and requisitioning all the resources of the village people. There's this mean guy named Hans who basically like bullies the citizens. He takes what he wants. He tries to set his eyes. He's obsessed with eating the little girl's pig, and he does. He basically grabs the pig and one night and pretty much slaughters him and eats him in a German sausage or something. I don't know.
Good.
So that's kind of dark too. And the little girl had to face the fact, as she narrates this as an older woman, because I think this is told from Colette's perspective a little bit too, because she does narrate what goes on. So it's kind of clear that it goes from it touches on all these perspectives. You kind of get what Colette is experiencing as a young innocent child, and then what she's reflecting back on as she's older, recounting what happened during this time during the war. And then you get the adults who are kind of fed up with this, and you get the children sort of understanding the situation they're in, and they sort of start to notice things change and start to get a lot worse. One of their friends, Rosie, who's Jewish, it's apparent that she wears the yellow star, and it even tackles the themes of the Holocaust, sort of basically people discriminating Jews, and sort of the anti-Jewish laws going into these occupied territories, and the adults being forced to be conscripted into slave labor, into Germany to work in the factories. So there's a lot of that history that isn't touched upon in the history books a little bit, and it's touched upon here. Sort of the civilian's perspective, especially in France, a region that's not talked about because, they surrendered, and we kind of get this perspective of, what it means to live in Nazi-occupied France. Basically like a more kid-friendly version of World War II, but it doesn't like basically water down what happens, It actually does show some dark things happening. Eventually Rosie is taken into safety, but unfortunately their friend Ferdinand is found out to be Jewish. He's not wearing his Jewish star, and he's pretty much arrested, and we eventually find out that he gets taken to Auschwitz and he dies there.
But we never saw Fernand again. He was murdered at Auschwitz, like so many others.
Yeah, that's pretty much told in the story. And eventually, like, the adults, some of the adults are involved in the French resistance, like the teacher. They refer to him as Sparrowhawk. He's found out to be aiding the resistance. He gets arrested, but gets rescued by the resistance. And, the father does come back. Ernest and Colette's father comes back, and he, is shown to be a good resistance leader. He's kind of in the resistance cell. He escaped a German POW camp. Basically made it to their little town, works with the French resistance, along with one of the older Morteau brothers named Pierre, who's also aiding the resistance. And then pretty much what happens is that there's this guy named Durand. And basically Durand pretty much, he rats out like everybody to the Nazis. And he represents kind of like the German Nazi collaborator during the time. And there were collaborators in these occupied territories. There were Nazi sympathizers, and you'll pretty much find out in this show what happens to Nazi sympathizers. It doesn't stray away from showing that too, showing that kind of justice.
Come on.
Oh, please, I've done nothing wrong. Tell that to the people who died because of you.
Don't hang around here, kids.
Basically, they find the hideouts. The Nazis shoot it up. And it's kind of another dark thing that happens too is sadly the teacher is, we're supposed to assume the teacher is dead, because what this show does too is off camera, like it shows like gunshots, kind of like these gunshots that happen in the corner. I think we're supposed to assume that, this is how the show shows death, but it kind of censors it a little bit just to keep it kid friendly, just to keep the history kid friendly. But, we do see some gunfights. We do see some, like, some epic shootouts, some explosions, and bombings. And as this night progresses, it kind of takes place in August of 1944, right as the Allies are kind of marching through France. So Paris has already been liberated. Eventually, like, the kids meet up with Canadians, and they think they're American, so that's kind of funny. I thought they were British until they actually mentioned, oh, no, we're Canadian. And, it's easy to get the Canadians confused with the British, and but the uniforms are pretty accurate too, given that all these soldiers are basically dressed in their factions. You actually know what factions they are. This ain't COD Vanguard where it's my team versus the enemy team.
They're Americans. Wow. No, we're Canadian. What are you doing here?
In the end, the Dieppe region is pretty much liberated by the Canadians. And as the Canadians march through, you kind of see in this final scene, of course, Durand gets what he deserves by French partisans. He gets whacked. But then you see the rounding up of German prisoners of war. And Otto does get caught, and he's about to get executed. But throughout this time, I also forgot to mention that he's one of the German characters that you can sympathize with, because he low-key started getting into an intimate relationship with Mrs. Morteau, who owns the farm. And since her husband, I'm pretty sure, passed on, he pretty much kind of gets himself attached to Mrs. Morteau, and Mrs. Morteau kind of gets attached to him as he sort of learns to sympathize with the resistance movement. And he's very anti-Nazi, anti-German occupation. He kind of wants to kind of help the resistance low key, and eventually, like, everybody vouches for him not to get it whacked. And what's nice is that he leaves his dress uniform, and he in the end he does help the surrounding farms. So he was a good guy. He was one of the good guys, sadly working for the bad guys. And it's kind of nice to see that that one character that not all the Germans were bad. Not all the Germans were Nazis. Not all the Wehrmacht were complicit with the Nazi ideals, or very much in favor of the war. They were sadly in very bad circumstances, and they got roped into this very hard situation, like everybody else in the war. And you know, the context you want to understand, but I'd say both get the message across. So yeah, it's pretty much up to you, really, how you want to see it, and in the context you want to understand. I think in the French dub version, in the English that some of the like Canadians speak in, I think they actually like swear. So I think in the English dub they had to change that. But anyway, it's also on Amazon Prime if you want to watch it, and I think maybe Netflix, but I think it's always available on YouTube too if you don't have those streaming services available. So yeah, guys, hope you guys enjoyed this sort of take on the Long Holiday. I'm surprised this show has a fan base. I also forgot to mention that. This show has a niche fan base, and it does have a small following. There's actually like fan art, I think, out on Google. I'm not gonna go look out for it, but I've seen it. I've seen it on Google Images. There's actual art that people have drawn about the show, the show's characters. So yeah, guys, stay tuned for more videos. I know this has been one of my big uploads in a long time. I'm trying to get back into the groove, like I said before, of uploading videos. So stay tuned, subscribe if you're new to the channel, like the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.